and welcome to Hallelujah Monkeyz for August 28th. My name is Dillon Flynn.
My name is Trevor Ickrath. Welcome to the second part of the Hallelujah Monkeyz End of the Summer Bananaz Blowout.
This was a week where there were a lot of sad Gorillaz fans, and I wasn't one of them because I was like, ooh, I got a secret. I got a special episode of the podcast that I'm excited about.
Hopefully this will help soothe all the pain everybody's feeling from not getting that stuff we were promised this week.
Yeah, if we can pull a little bit of that misery out of your Gorillaz life, then we've done our job. That's our goal this week, Trevor.
That's what the show's all about.
So then let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the news.
Let's talk about the news.
It's all good news now.
This might be the biggest news in the history of this show. Do you remember that remix that we already talked about? The Saturn's Bars one with all of the Jamaican rappers on it?
I remember every remix we've talked about perfectly.
Of course. Well, now that one is out on iTunes, Trevor.
Dillon, you tell me that like I haven't already downloaded it and played it so many times by now.
My only regret is that it's only 99 cents. Like I wish that I could drop $100 on this remix, you know?
I actually created a couple additional iTunes accounts and took out a few more credit cards just to do that.
The other news is G-Mixes. We have the 5th volume of G-Mixes. Now, I was also getting a little bit bored of this recurring news segment, but they mixed it up this week.
Right, they started adhering to some themes or something?
Yeah, here's how it works. 2D's G-Mix is called the Carnival Edition.
Okay, that checks out. That tracks.
It was co-curated by Cadenza, the artist who made that remix we were just talking about.
That's fun.
2D/Cadenza making a little mixtape.
Stuff
very
2D
cool.
would listen to while working the fair rides at his dad's.
Right, exactly. Then you've got the Russell Kick Back and Relax Edition G-Mix.
Okay, very chill. Russell's a chill guy. He does enjoy a nice little nap.
He loves a nap, that's for sure. Isn't that funny that like the music video for this band that he's most active in, his subplot involves taking a nap?
Free Russell Hobbs.
This is interesting. This is a little bit more out of left field, in my opinion. Tell me what you think. Noodles is the new Jack Swing edition.
Yeah, I don't really see where that's coming from.
Where does that come from? I mean, I know she's a cosmopolitan gal, and she listens to a whole lot of different things.
Do we know if she's a big Prince fan or not?
I don't know. That's a good question. But let me tell you who's on that playlist, because let's examine it and decide if it's noodly enough, okay?
Okay.
We got Janet Jackson with Rhythm Nation. We've got Hold On by En Vogue. We've got Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe. These are great songs. I think these are great songs.
It doesn't feel very noodly.
I would even obviously I could see them on a Russell G-Mix. I could even probably sooner see them on a 2D G-Mix, to be honest.
Yeah, like Poison, definitely. That's almost like the rap equivalent of like the Human League on some kind of weird level.
And then, of course, Trevor, the final one is Murdoch's, and his is the Bath Edition.
I don't like this. How do you feel about this?
You don't like them leaning into the meme?
No, how do you feel about that? I feel like sometimes it works for some artists, like Drake is allowed to lean into memes. Although, I don't know if he even does. You know, he kind of just sits back and lets it all happen and watches from the tower in Toronto, you know? They're leaning into it. I mean, like...
Let me tell you the one time when it was perfect. In the motion capture YouTube interview, when he goes, the second I got into that bath, I thought, this is going to be a meme. That was funny.
I like pretty much everything that happened in those motion capture videos, so I'll give you that.
That really was like a highlight of the phase, I feel like.
It was really good. Yeah, I recently looked through a bunch of like highlights on YouTube and stuff. It was just, there's some wacky stuff going on there.
Oh, I should tell you that each G-Mix also has an accompanying emoji before the title. So Russell's Kick Back and Relax, you've got the AOK fingers, obviously black skin. The New Jack Swing edition, you've got the dancing lady with the red dress.
Hey, I hate for this kind of stuff to keep seeping into the podcast, but you know the OK symbol with your fingers is also kind of like a white power thing, right?
Do you think, I'm sure that was intentional, wasn't it?
I mean, what's going on with this band?
The 2D Carnival edition was a palm tree, which I think that's right. And then guess, what do you think the Bath edition was?
Was it like the shower head or a bath or something?
Yes, of course. Of course it was.
Okay.
Of course it was.
Discussion question.
Yeah, go for it.
What do you think it might have sounded like if Gorillaz had been commissioned to record an original song for the Emoji Movie?
Oh, my God. I'd like to imagine that they would have like tossed the whole thing off to Twilight Tone, and he would have like really half-assed it, you know? Like, I could imagine it being like the dub-dum of this phase almost, where he just like took a few scraps from some sessions and put them together into something.
It's weird because We Got the Power is almost perfectly tooled for a kind of big, animated children's film commercial.
Yeah,
or something
could you imagine
like
them dancing to it in the credits at the end of the...
we already got that video of all the toys dancing to it, right?
Yeah.
Very easy to imagine.
Okay, this is the actual story, Trevor, the actual story of the week, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Last week, you'll remember, Trevor, I said, next week, we're going to talk to the director of Bananaz, and we're going to review a whole G-side's worth of new Gorillaz music.
It was going to be a big, super extravaganza, double-packed episode. I was really hyped about it.
I'm still really hyped because that Ceri Levy interview is amazing. We'll get to it in a minute.
But absolutely.
But yeah, no, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Nobody got their Super Deluxe vinyls. What more, some people got an email notification that they will be getting theirs on October 20th.
Which is quite a ways from now.
That's a 2-month delay. And you know what? Here's the thing, Trevor. Delay all you want. Nothing good ever came out of releasing something too early, so take all the time you need. What bothers me is the lack of communication.
Right. I mean, what the real shame is that girls have had such a perfect track record before of delivering on all their promises. It's really a shame to see this thing besmirch their perfect record.
Well, perhaps you have a point there. Do you remember the Stylo car controversy?
I do. I can't remember how it was resolved. Did those ever end up coming out?
No, they never ended up coming out. What happened was they took orders for a little toy car that looked like the Stylo car, right? Mm-hmm. How this ended was Jamie Hewlett writing like a heartfelt email to everybody who bought one saying, when we started, we thought we had a licensing deal in place with GM that would let us do it, and then we didn't. And so we started making these things that we can't legally make, and we certainly can't send them to you, so here's a refund, everybody. We're sorry.
God, Phase 3 was a mess.
It was a mess, wasn't it?
Jeez.
I don't think we need something heartfelt, but it would have been nice if everybody who's like on the Gorillaz newsletter had gotten a mail out saying like, hey, sorry, our printer is being weird or whatever, pushed it back 2 months. But no communication, that's obnoxious.
Yeah. Hey, that brings us to another discussion question, though. What are some of the Gorillaz disappointments with a Z in recent memory?
Well, let's get it out of the way right away. Let's talk about C-Sides. That's got to be number one.
That was a big one.
That's a full album's worth of Gorillaz music that we have not and will probably never see.
Never get. I know another big gripe that I still see expressed within the Gorillaz fan community is how inaccessible the Demon Days live shows were in Phase 2. I know a lot of people were like looking forward to seeing that album performed live, and they're still like a little, like, I don't want to say bitter because it's, they have a right to be kind of miffed that they never did a proper tour for that album, and they only kind of did 2 installations.
There's songs on that album, for example, Every Planet We Reach Is Dead, that have still only been played in those 2 residencies.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
Fingers crossed that on this as this tour continues, we'll get some of those gems,
On a more personal note, I'm still kind of broken up. I wasn't able to make it to one of the Spirit houses.
Would you count this as a disappointment? The fact that there's no way to access the old Kong websites anymore? Does that count as a disappointment?
I would count that, yeah, because that's a lot of material that was like, especially the Plastic Beach site too. That stuff is just gone. Especially
for those young Gorillaz fans who just have never seen that stuff,
Like, I guess you have the app this time around, but really that is nowhere close to the scale they used to do things on.
We've had hologram tours promised to us over the years that never materialized. We had a Pharrell collaboration that we've seen neither hide nor hair of. Phase 4 Snoop Dogg is missing in action.
Basically, this band sucks. But do you want to talk to some dude who made an entire movie about him?
Absolutely. Let's talk about this ahead of time a little bit. Let's give them a contextual bedrock. So, as we were getting into talking about Bananaz on the show, I was like, we got to talk to Ceri. Ceri, not only by all accounts seems to be a pleasant, open, fun guy, easy to talk to, but he's breathed the rarefied air of having been there for pretty much every moment of the first half of this band's existence. So
he's almost, you might say, the 4th gorilla.
Absolutely.
The third being our favorite son, Cass Brown.
Cass Brown. I'd actually say that's the case, because I would say that the hierarchy would go like Damon, Jamie, then Cass, then Ceri, and then I would say like Remy might be my next choice because he's been ground four for so long, you know.
Yeah, I think so. He was kind of there at ground zero almost. Yeah, that's fair.
You might think that talking to a guy like Ceri Levy would be intimidating, but he was just immediately so sweet, so open and funny and giving, and we just love talking to him, and we can't wait for you guys to hear it. So let's not waste any time, right?
Let's go talk to Ceri.
Ceri, thank you so much for coming on Hallelujah Monkeyz. This is a big deal for us and for the show.
Yeah, great to have you on.
Oh, thanks very much. Nice to be here. Nice to be chatting with you guys.
I watched Bananaz again last night, Ceri, and I think it was the second or third time I've watched it this year even, and this time I was like, okay, I'm going to come up with some good questions on this watch, and then I found myself getting totally sucked back into it. I took almost no notes. It hangs together so well, like not only just as a holy grail or like a fan document, but it's just such an engrossing watch, like on a movie level.
It is really kind of like a holy grail and very engrossing. I mean, I remember the first time I watched it, I was going through a part of my life where I wasn't really super into Gorillaz, and this was kind of almost what got me back into the band. I was like, wow, I want to go check everything out that I just saw again.
First of all, Ceri, and this is very important, we should get it out of the way now. I'm assuming, because of your pedigree as a super fan, that you have seen 2D's commercials with David Luiz for Chelsea football.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, you know, it's thoroughly entertaining.
Does it feel a little bit like when you have two different groups of friends meeting at a party? Like, is it stressful that way?
Well, it's kind of strange because you know that football world is usually so separate from every other sort of facet. So them getting that together, yeah. It's quite incredible, really.
Pitch me. I'm a classic, you know, brainy, nerdy Yankee whose sports confuse me. So pitch me why I should be a Chelsea fan, why I should become a hooligan, and why Chelsea should be my team.
Well, because the best people support them, and also the colour blue is so beautiful that we play in, and we're a damn fine football team, and yeah, more than that. What more do you need to know? It's who we support. You know, I took Damon down to his first ever game with Chelsea, and you know, it's stuck ever since. So, quality side, quality fans.
What do you think, Trevor? Should we watch a Chelsea football game and come back on the show and report if we've become super fans?
I think we might have to live comment on one for the podcast one day.
That's a great idea. Everybody is going to download that episode.
That's a whole episode, yeah.
Okay, I want to get into the making of Bananaz and your experience with Gorillaz and all that good stuff, Ceri.
Yeah, should we just start at the beginning? Ceri, do you remember what the first piece of footage you shot for Gorillaz was?
Yeah, I mean, the way it all started was Damon and Jamie lived together, and they were sharing a flat, and I used to go around in the morning with coffee and say good morning, because they'd invariably had a different lifestyle to me at the time. I'd met my wife and was living there, and I'd pop round on the way to the gym in the morning where Damon and I would go most mornings. And one day they just basically said, oh, we've had this idea of an animated cartoon band. And I said, you're nuts. It sounds great. And I said, why don't we just document it? Because if it's a disaster, it'll be a very funny thing to see you two, you know, activating something as a complete and utter disaster.
Holy shit. Like, do you think you were seeing them the actual morning after the first Gorillaz conversation idea?
Yeah.
It's a historic moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
My other question is, what did it smell like in that apartment? Were they being hygienic? Were they cleaning up? Were dishes stacking up to the ceiling? What was going on? What was that living situation like?
Actually, it was not as bad as one would think it might have been or could have been. No, actually, they're both very much into cleanliness and things. So it was, you know, yeah, it might have been a bit fusty first thing in the morning, but nothing a bit of ventilation couldn't sort out. And they've always been pretty organised in that way, those two. So yeah, it was not some post-apocalyptic flat where you could imagine cartoon characters growing out of the mold on the floor. It really wasn't like that.
That's so crazy though. Like, I'm wondering now if I wonder if you take the Ceri Levy ingredient out of this witch's brew, like if you hadn't been there to kind of egg those boys on and point a camera at their face, like if they would have had enough momentum to keep working on this after coming up with the initial idea, like you could be indirectly responsible for all of this.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, Gorillaz really was my idea. No.
If you had said no, they probably would have scrapped the whole thing then and there.
That's it. That's all I have to say. I'll see you soon. Bye. No, I mean, I cannot take any credit for it. Although it was quite funny further down the line on tour, especially on the first American tour, when we used to do press with, Dan the Automator then, when everyone got bored, everyone would pretend they were someone else. So at one point, Jamie was saying he was Dan the Automator. Dan was saying he was Damon, and nobody ever worked it out. And it was really funny. And at one point, Dan and Jamie did an interview, and they're being particularly difficult that day. And they said, "We've no idea why you're talking to me. Kerry wrote all the songs," and it was just brilliantly confusing for everything. And Damon would never have gone that far. But it was kind of funny. But going back to the very beginning, that both those guys, I knew them before Gorillaz, and Damon I'd known for years and years, since he first signed his publishing deal with MCA for Blur. And I met them on the night they signed their deal. So, both of them have always had that ability to get stuck into a project and make things work. And, Gorillaz, look, I was in the right place to egg them on and say, yeah, and what have you. But they were, once they got the idea, they were all guns blazing on it, and they set out to make it what it is, and made it a really interesting project and a great success.
I wonder, do you, if you had to guess, do you know what the actual first second of footage you shot of the project was?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the first thing, because Jamie then went off and just started doing. The first thing I shot was going into his studio and he's showing me the drawings, the first drawings.
This would have been when it was like a trio and the Monkeyz in the band and Paula Crackers in the band.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, those first two images of the band when Paula was in, they were there. But it also done the first drawings of the band for real. It's something that he worked really quickly on getting drawings done at the very beginning. And it evolved quite quickly. And, Paula went her way, as it were, and Gorillaz ended up going their way. So, yeah, that was really, I think that was actually the first footage that day in his studio talking about it, which is pretty much the front end of the film when we go back in time.
It is so surreal hearing somebody who was present at such an embryonic stage of the project just telling the history directly to me.
These things are weird because you never think of things like that as historical until you're a long way away from it. And I guess as a filmmaker, I think the greatest moments in film are when you see something that's happened years ago. I mean, I love seeing current documentaries and what have you, but there becomes, once you get a bit of time passing, I think it becomes really interesting to look back on it and you go, wow, okay, that really was a moment in time. And so many documentaries get made where they're out with the band and it's happening now, and then you see it, it's out on TV, reality bites, and it's over. We don't allow ourselves distance of time anymore, I think, with especially in music documentaries. We don't see footage shot from years ago coming out in the same way.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we were talking about it kind of on the show recently in a discussion of some of the DVDs the band released in the past. It's only been about 15 years since the band started, but the way we've seen the way bands have changed operating has been. It's so significant.
For sure. And a good recent example of a rock doc or a music doc that a lot of people cite as being so bad it's good or something would be that Metallica one, Some Kind of Monster. And part of what makes that that documentary an interesting failure is that the people making it don't realize that the worst Metallica album is being made. So there's no context of time. Everyone's just in the moment talking about this like it's going to be some great thing. Anyway,
that's really interesting. That because I love that Metallica documentary for exactly those reasons.
Yeah, it somehow helped it.
Do you remember when you first became aware that what you were shooting was for a feature documentary?
Yeah, when we finished.
I mean, you had to do something with all of it, right?
Well, but I mean, there's also the thing, because I shot it over 7 years, you kind of think, well, there's never going to be an end in sight. The idea, one of the other things which not many people really know is that when we started doing it, we had this idea of just shooting everything from the neck down, so you never knew who was behind the whole project, which, of course, would never have worked.
Oh, what a nightmare that would have been.
Yeah.
That would have been a total nightmare.
That's a good question. Do you remember when the kind of like possibility of keeping everybody's identity a secret kind of like went out the window?
Yeah, pretty quickly. I mean, the one thing we didn't do, because there were lots of people who came in to audition for part, it was kind of like trying to work it out, I think, at the beginning, and people came in to sing and be, say, 2D and what have you. And then it became apparent that actually that was not the way that it was going to work. I think, Damon realised that actually he sings his songs that he writes himself really well, and then worked out that actually the way to do it was with guests and getting them to come in to the fold. So, we kind of realised, or they realised, after a certain amount of people have come in, that actually that was the way to go.
Will you just say that again? So the idea that basically the way that Miho was sort of cast to play Noodle on that first album, they actually auditioned singers to come in and play 2D on the album. How would that have worked?
Well, it couldn't, because once they started developing the idea more and more, I think they realised that that was not the way to go. I mean, yeah, you've got people playing the characters all the time, but musician-wise, it became a different thing. Damon would be doing the vocals. I don't think I'm giving anything away there.
Wait, the guy from Blur?
But, so it sort of evolved all the time. And, Damon and Jamie were both, excellent at managing things rather than starting out, well, this is how it's going to be. It evolved. And I think that's what makes Gorillaz so successful, because yes, there is your band and your characters, but you have this ever-changing cast of people. Everyone is pretty much replaceable apart from Damon and Jamie. Including the filmmaker. That's kind of the nature of Gorillaz. It's a roll call of people who come through and pass through for an amount of time and then move on. I think that's been the really clever thing about it, is that they've got interesting people into play all the time and continually evolve. So everything's fresh. There's no sort of 15-year malaise or whatever, because they've all got fed up with each other. It's an exciting sort of, melting pot of people and ideas.
And it seems like, you couldn't get bored making a Gorillaz album, because it's going to be a totally different experience every time.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned in the Reddit AMA you did, Ceri, about you pointed to the moment with Ibrahim Ferrer when he showed up as being a really surreal moment for you as a documentarian, with like his posse in tow. And I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, like what you remember about that day and what that moment was like for you.
Working with Ibrahim Ferrer was an extraordinary sort of moment. I mean, this is a legend as far as a lot of us are concerned. This is a man who is one of the main figureheads of Cuban music, and ever since Ry Cooder's film, and working and bringing them to the forefront, they were one of the first real sort of crossovers for world music, I guess, in the Western world. It changed our view of things, I think. And when you discovered the Buena Vista Social Club and their music and the joy in the music, but yet also what they'd all lived through and been through, you realised that, you were sort of touching on something that was completely different to the world that we've been in. Okay, Damon and I made a documentary when he went to Mali for the first time and worked with African musicians and what have you. And Damon's always had this ability to look beyond his compartmentalized structure that the world would like to place him in, especially at the time of Blur. When he started working with African musicians, they went, oh, some musicians should just stay where they are, and they shouldn't be interfering in these kind of things. And actually, that's not right. He of his generation is the only one who went out and started exploring beyond the boundaries of his own indie pop, whatever you want to call it, musical world, and made some amazing discoveries. And this is Gorillaz now allowed him that ability, not just to make a solo album or do this or do that. It allowed him to have a vehicle where he could go and explore other worlds. And when Ibrahim Ferrer and the Buena Vista Social Club, who we'd been to see the night before in Hyde Park, if I remember right, when they all turned, it wasn't the whole Buena Vistas, but, Ibrahim and a few of the guys and all his family and everything walked into the studio door. It was just wonderful because he was just so engaging, spoke no English. Damon didn't really speak Spanish at the time. And yet the connection happened with music, with lots of, you see it in the film where Damon's pointing up to the sky, then down low, and they were getting this, everything was happened with pointing. It was brilliant, and a communication through music. And for me, what was incredible was when we were filming people in the studio, it was really an interesting thing for me, because as a documentary maker, you want to get everything as you can and make it real. I don't like to recreate anything. And you never know how people are going to react to you when you're there. They've met you for 2 seconds. I shot everything on a very small Sony P7 or whatever it is, tiny little handheld thing, but with a decent mic attached to it, because people didn't take me seriously. And I thought, just use a camcorder, then that takes away the need for film crew and what have you, and lets you get in close. And I just walked into the vocal booth with Ibrahim and just hoped it was going to be all right. And Damon was pretty good because he always introduced me to people and said, if he's a pain in the arse, just throw him out, or, if he gets in the way, just push him out the way, whatever. He was very good because he'd always intro me and would set it up for me. So going into the vocal booth, and this vocal booth with Ibrahim, I have to say, the camera looks really close to Ibrahim. And that's because it is. I'm about 1.5 feet away from him.
It's very intimate.
Yeah, I mean, to your testament as a filmmaker, I think how struck you were by this session really comes through in the film. I mean, it's presented with such like a kind of almost like an air of reverence.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also wonderment as well. I mean, he sat there and he sang everything, and he didn't worry about it in the slightest. There was a lot of corrections of ideas and thoughts and how it would work out. And he was just fantastic. And there's very few people that you can be 1.5 feet away from and listen to them create what they do in front of you. And he was one of them. The other one I ended up in a situation like that with on another project was actually Tom Jones in LA.
I mean, he doesn't even need a microphone. He sings so loud.
Oh my God. I mean, he nearly bust my head open with the way he sang. And that was for a charity project. And he was doing a version of Gimme Shelter by the Stones with, I don't know if you remember, one of the world's worst rock bands.
Oh my gosh.
And that was with New Model Army. I don't know if you remember them.
Was that a moment where you had to step aside yourself and just say, Tom Jones is screaming rape murder at me right now?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no one better to do it. And he was fantastic. But really, again, it was a tiny vocal booth and I was 1.5 feet away from him. And it was amazing. And it was that kind of when you experience true sort of moments of vocal agility, vocal skill, vocal beauty, but with Ibrahim, it was something so pure. and so heartfelt that you didn't even need to know what he was singing to understand it was something beautiful he was coming out with.
I think it's my favorite vocal performance of his on tape, to be honest.
It's really powerful.
It is, and I mean, on Demon Days, when we went out on tour on Demon Days, we ended the set with that every night, and it was amazing because we put the footage, that close-up footage of him on a screen above the stage.
Yeah, I actually went to one of those shows, and when I watched Bananaz, I recognized it from the encore.
There wasn't a dry eye in the house because you knew that what was filmed wasn't him just miming. It was the actual take that's on the record. So it did something that connected really personally because it was real. It wasn't just a video. That was him singing. He was coming to life again through that vocal, and it was an incredible day. And he was a lovely man and just one of the greats. And it left a lasting impression. I think it did for Damon. Damon loves working with musicians and he appreciates what they do. And I think it meant an awful lot to him that day as well, because it just took everything to another place yet again, which is what he does all the time.
Well, I think it was an elemental moment for the project because there are a lot of collaborators you can point to later on that kind of stem from that philosophy of like, we're not going to be bound by nationality or age or whatever when we're picking the people who work with us. And there's another moment not too long after that in the documentary, Ceri, that I think it's a pretty important moment because it documents an artist who's no longer with us, a Proof from D12, and he just comes across as so fun and so charismatic, especially when he's like rattling off like super deep nerd trivia about this Del the Funky Homo Sapien beat that he likes, and like that whole sequence is so interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the way we've always been told is that was recorded the day after the September 11th attack. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right. Ironically, we just came back on the 8th or 9th, 7th or 8th from New York, and we've been over there, and the guys have been doing some interviews, and I think it was with Spin Magazine, and they said, where do you want to go? Do you want to go, Empire State or Twin Towers, somewhere high or whatever? I said, well, let's go. For me, visually, it'd be great to go to the Empire State, and that's why there's that shot of the Twin Towers in there, because that happened about 36 hours. Whoa,
shot. That's crazy. I did not even think about that.
There is, on the mix, there's a sound of an airplane just on the end of that footage, which a lot of people don't notice, but it's in there. And that's why, because there, but for the grace of God, etc., it was a very strange moment. And we literally got back and then everything happened. And the idea had been to get together with them, and they were stuck in London. So it seemed like a perfect time to get together, and they came over to the studio, and that was it. What's really interesting is I could have released an hour-long documentary just with those guys alone. Proof and I got on really well, and there's a bit which I don't think made it into any of the out of footage, but I'd love it I loved it because it was a really funny thing, because Proof and I got on really well, and Damon, as usual, was checking that everything was okay, and he came into the studio, but he said, look, if he's being a pain in the ass, you just get rid of him. He said, it's okay. We go back. Me and Ceri are cool. We go way back like spinal cords. And I love that, but it would have been vanity to put that in the film.
He really does come off as just a ray of sunshine. Like, it's so sad to have lost such a young and bright, talented dude like that.
Yeah, and it's just so sad how it all ended up. But, we met them a few times when we went over America, and we'd go out for a drink with them. And, Proof and I just got on really, really well. And he always, I'll never forget one night in New York, and he took a shining to the Gorillaz laminates, and he's going, that's such a cool laminate. And he was wearing, his diamond-encrusted D12 chain, which, and I said, well, look, I'll swap you my laminate for your D12 chain. And so he did. So for the rest of the night, I I ended up with this D12 chain. Hey,
Are there any pictures of this?
no, there aren't.
Ah, son of a bitch.
I was hoping you still had it and were wearing it right now.
Yeah, it was the time before anyone really used mobile phones in the way we do. And, it was really funny because as I went, he just went, yeah, just one thing. And he remembered to do the swap back for the chain. But he was funny. They were all funny. They were really good guys. And he's sorely missed, I think.
We were talking about 911, which I guess we should continue because we kind of see that as a moment of transition for kind of the identity of Gorillaz from this project that was kind of intended to take down like the manufactured pop industry to a project that was kind of had more global ambitions in mind. When did you become aware of that shift happening?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think necessarily it was a deliberate choice. I think it's musically, I think Damon just moves and he listens to music. He is aware of what's going on, and then things happen, and he makes things happen. I mean, that's the great thing about Damon is he makes things happen. Always. And you can't predict what he's going to do next. Whether it's going off and writing an opera or this or that. That's what makes him. I hate saying it in earshot of him, but in a lot of ways, he's a polymath genius, that he does have that ability to just find something and hit the moment just right. And that's what he does, I mean, he works so hard. He does. He works so incredibly hard, if I'm honest, I don't know anyone who quite works in the same way as he does. Musically, he's always challenging himself.
For you, there wasn't a moment where you were kind of like, wow, this little cartoon band is certainly getting a bit more serious, a bit more socially focused.
A little more political.
I think 911 is an important moment because, you get all sorts of people got involved then, we had an oud player. He got an oud player in. Terry, of course, was on the track. And he does talk at the time, about how it's more and more important to involve these other cultures within our culture. So
right.
I don't think that moment changed him, but it was a moment that he saw the possibility of. And it's the moment that it just happened like that, But I think he could have gone down that path quite happily without the tragic events of 9/11, I mean, it would just happen to be there we are 24 hours later, stuck in a studio with some American rappers and, Terry Hall and an oud player. That's just what happens when you put things out there.
Was it surreal to be in a creative headspace the day after such a sort of international moment of panic and fear?
Well, it was odd because you never really understand what's going on, and maybe reporting has changed in a certain way that today it might have been more terrifying because let's not forget that the media now try and terrify everybody to within an inch of their life more and more every day.
Right.
I remember when that happening, it was just, oh my God, what's happened? But because it was the first sort of, global terror attack, I guess, I think we viewed it slightly differently. I mean, I was meant to be going to Spain with my wife that day, but because the guys were still over, D12 were still here, we decided that we'd do the studio thing. I actually took my wife to Heathrow that morning, and she flew down to Spain.
That morning?
Yeah, that morning, because nobody knew what to do in those first 12 hours.
That's so crazy.
We were watching it and then going, well, and she said, what should I do? I said, get the flight. I would have thought there's no safer time to fly right now in a weird kind of way. I mean, we will be in lockdown within 20 minutes of that happening nowadays. Then you got down to Heathrow. People were just wandering around in a daze because nobody had experienced this. So nobody knew what the rules were.
Right.
So she flew off to Spain and then shutdown happened. She was about the only flight that took off. And she still says, I can't believe you sent me up in the air on that day. I said, okay, it's crazy when you look back on it now, but I couldn't get a flight out for another week or so. It it was a very strange time. But, this is all learning. But, it's also been used by those that want to be a controlling device over most of us anyway now. Everything is in, lieu of terror or terrorist attacks. And that kind of scares me now, that we use that as the fallback routine for controlling the masses, as it were.
Speaking more to that transition from Gorillaz phase to phase, do you remember how and when you found out that there would actually be a second Gorillaz album?
Again, it was pretty much, there was a hiatus, and Damon said, yeah, I'm getting on with it. And I was pretty busy at the time, and sort of kept my eye on it. And then sort of De La Soul appeared. And yeah, we decided to change the way it was filmed as well a little bit, because we everything had been so studio based, and I was getting really worried about the amount of studio footage that we were getting. But we did get some. I got a lot with people like Shaun Ryder and what have you, but that became difficult to use, shall we say.
Wait, whoa. You're not skating past that. I have to know what you know about Shaun Ryder in the studio for Dare, because it's lore even within the
it is lore
band.
That he came up with that they changed the song from It's There to Dare just because of the way he was pronouncing it and saying like it's coming up in his headphones as the volume raised.
Which I gotta say, that sounds like such a line of bullshit to me. I don't think that that's true. I need you to weigh in on this, Ceri.
It just sounds like a cutesy story they made up.
It's kind of true, though. I hate to say it. I've got the footage. But everything with Shaun is never quite as it seems. And something happened with my camera. I've got no sound on it. But I filmed with him, and he was great. He just was who he was at the time. And, he really did. He's saying there, but it does come across as Dare. It is very strange, but it is a cutesy story. But it really is kind of true.
That's so crazy.
It was funny because he threw everyone out of the studio. He wouldn't even let Damon in there. I was the only one. He said, "Oh, you can stay. It's all right. You can stay."
You were chosen.
And but then it became a little difficult to use the footage for one reason or another. Yeah, he just got on with it, and he's got a very strange accent, and it did go awry on him.
Wait, now, for one reason or another, are you intimating that because of some of the chaos that is indivisible from Shaun Ryder, towering celebutant figure, is there just something that you couldn't put out?
No, it didn't quite work, and Shaun, I think, was also not particularly happy the way he was at the time. He was changing, as it were. So it was very raw, the footage. So we just decided that it would be better to use stuff from the live gigs for Shaun. Everyone gets their look in the film, and it's working out what bit suits them better. Nothing particularly untoward. We just chose the live stuff.
I know we're all over the place and jumping around, but I wanted to, real quick, going back to that transition phase, Ceri, was any part, were you surprised at all to know that there would be another Gorillaz album, or were you kind of expecting it?
I think because the first album had been so successful and so different and so varied, but the period that it lasted for was quite a long time, and Damon was getting on with other things. Nothing was ever set in stone. It wasn't right, I must get back in the studio, from what I can see. It really was, it came around that actually suddenly he decided to turn to that. And that's pretty much how Damon is, he gets on with various projects, and sometimes there's a hiatus between them and sometimes there isn't. And I think that was very interesting, when suddenly that was there. And he moved. Sometimes, if I remember rightly, Demon Days was, on the whole, recorded quite quickly. Once he gets his songs together, he goes in and he works really hard, 9 to 5, as they say, which is pretty true. And he just treats it like a job once he's got his creative thinking cap on.
In the actual hiatus itself, we know just from interviews and whatnot that Jamie and Damon and Cass Brown were working on a screenplay called Celebrity Harvest. Were you involved with filming anything for that, or were you not filming at all during the hiatus?
I filmed a couple of very boring meetings about it, and There's a lot of stuff I filmed, and, it never makes a cut or gets near because meetings are boring. You film these things just in case something interesting comes out of it, and it never did. It's kind of like one of those things. I hate meetings, and I hate doing talking head interviews. I like something to be happening. I think that's what makes Bananaz work, is that it's all about process, but you're witnessing process as it happens. And I think that's what makes it slightly different. There's no sort of, sit down and chat to somebody after the event and go, oh, do you remember when? I also think what makes it different is that somebody once said to me, everything seems though the camera's slightly tilting up. And I said, well, that's because I'm so short, so it gives a childlike perspective on the world. So
that's great.
We kind of feel like you're kind of with adults, as it were, which, I'm not saying any of them are, but, it's, I think the childlike perspective helps it. Yeah, hiatus, it happened. And then suddenly they were flying, I just love the day Dennis Hopper comes in, that's another one of those special days when you realise things have gone to somewhere you never expected they would go to. And he was great. He was fantastic. And I love that whole thing when Damon's talking to him, because everyone's in awe. There's Dennis Hopper, who's been there, done that, everything he cared to think of. Probably the most rock and roll person you will ever meet. And yet he was so un-rock and roll. He was just charming. He was nice, asking for instruction. And I love it when when he says, so how do you want me to do it? And Damon just says, well, like Dennis Hopper. And he just goes, yeah, right. Okay. And that's it. Off he goes.
That's great.
So yeah, I love that day, that and Ibrahim, they were the two special days for being in a studio with somebody, and D12 and De La Soul. And actually they were all pretty special.
Pretty special.
They're a pretty special band.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Ceri, you said you kind of took a different approach to filming once the Demon Days phase kind of kicked in, and you can tell that there's noticeably less studio footage. But do you remember how watching Damon work on creating Demon Days was different than watching him work on the first album?
No, not really. And again, I gave him, because I was off, I missed quite a lot of the early stuff in the studio. So, but when I got into the later stuff, he was still doing what he does. He was still working it, being very organised at trying to find, how to put a track together. And I don't think he really changes the way he works very often. He just gets his ideas. And half the time, you see him in the film where he's going around banging stuff, hitting stuff, and all of it's just trying to get sound into him so he can start developing. And that's what he does, he does an awful lot. Now I know he does a lot on his iPad and things and various other ways, but he's just always looking to work out the next song, really.
I love that moment when he runs off because he hasn't finished the lyric for El Mañana yet. And then he comes back with it. And in the movie, you get the feeling that it didn't take him too long to get everything down. Do you happen to remember in real time how long it took after Damon walked out of the studio before he came back in with the lyric sheet?
I can't actually, to be honest. No, I don't think it was too long at all, but it's the one thing I think he always hates doing, is getting on with the lyrics, there's a lot of stuff where he puts down guide vocals and it's just sounds and shapes of words. And
sure, some of those even see release eventually, especially on the B-side compilation type things. You hear some of those first draft Damon lyric attempts,
He hates sitting down and doing it, but he writes really good lyrics. It's really strange, that when push comes to shove, he goes and gets it done. But from what I can see, and a lot of the time, it's not the first thing that happens. It seems to be the tune, the melody, whatever, that gets done first.
A lot of collaborators with the band, Ceri, will describe a moment when Damon kind of briefs them about the song they're about to work on, where he'll say, okay, so this song is kind of about this, and this is what we're going for, and he'll give them some direction before they start their work on it. Did you ever capture any moments like that, and does any of that stick out in your head as far as, I don't know, De La Soul or anybody in studio?
Yeah, you mentioned the Dennis Hopper one.
Dennis was different because it was spoken word, so it was still under his remit, as it were, and he had written words for that. Everyone else, it's a blank canvas. He likes to play people the tunes or whatever, and then D12 talked on 911 about the drum sound and things. But on the whole, most people, from what I can see that came in, he'd play them something and say, look, whatever you want to do. And if they came up, I think, with a vocal that meant he had to cut the track up, he'd do that. But on the whole, very little guidance, as in, I want you to sing it like this, or I want you to sing about this, or,
But not that kind of impressionistic, this is a song that's about this kind of thing stuff?
No.
Right, okay.
One of mine, Dillon's, one of our favorite scenes takes place backstage at Harlem during the rehearsals for those Demon Days live shows. It involves Damon kind of having to defend the lyrics of Dirty Harry to kind of an upset teacher who had an issue with the lyrics. Our opinion is that the lyric is indeed to keep myself from harm, and Damon is just trying to kind of say anything he can to get her off his back with that, to keep myself among talk. What's your opinion about the from harm versus among, and really this moment in general, because it is a much talked about one in the fandom?
I think he's right. I remember at the time you don't even see it, but the lyrics were on the tour manager's computer, and we ended up printing them off to show them, if I remember rightly.
I think in the documentary, she holds up a lyric sheet of her own and shows that hers says from
and it hadn't come from the right person. We believe, and if I remember rightly, again, that they had been transcribed by someone other than somebody from the actual band and taken it from actual lyrics. So as far as I can't swear 100%, but that's how I do vaguely remember it. What I loved was the fact that, he's surrounded and having to stand his ground. And for him, he totally believed what he was saying. The paperwork that came along then later seemed to back everything up that he was saying. And it was it was a really difficult situation, because he was looking forward to a really nice morning just working with the choir, and had no idea he was going to walk into that kind of shitstorm.
I refuse to believe it. It's a cover-up. It's a project-wide cover-up. It is absolutely from harm.
It really does sound like, at least the kids, I don't know about Damon, but at least the kids, it does sound like they're singing from harm to me. Was that woman who was angry, was she connected with the choir? She was like a director or a teacher?
God, I can't remember, but they were from some school choir. They were really lovely people, but they were kind of very hung up on certain things and looked at things in a far more American kind of way than a British kind of way, from what I can remember. Right. And maybe we don't say or do things in the same way, but I think he was really shocked that there was some kind of outrage with it all. In fact, I know he was shocked, because I've seen him in situations before, and I've never seen him quite like that, where he really is quite horrified that this could be something that he never realized. And it all worked out in the end, and everybody was happy and everybody was fine about things. But it was a very odd morning. That it was meant to be a sort of, can't wait to hear them sing. Because at first it was just me and him, just went along in a cab. I thought, it might be quite fun to shoot this. And for me, I remember thinking while I'm filming, I'm going, this is going to be one of those bits of film that I really hope it all comes out. And actually, the bit that's in the film, it's so short. I mean, that goes on for about 20 minutes. And at first, I just wanted to run the whole 20 minutes, because
oh, God, I would kill to see the whole 20 minutes, Ceri. I would kill.
I don't know if you know this, but the very first, when you're cutting a film together, I did it with an incredible guy called Seb Monk, the editor.
Yeah, Seb also worked as an editor on a lot of Gorillaz music videos. He's kind of a Zombie Flesh Eaters guy, right?
Absolutely, and he's a top guy. And I remember when we were putting out the best bits, when you get your assembly edit together, when you're starting out, and we worked on it for a while, and then Christmas Eve, I think it was, I said, okay, we got to the end of the last tape and we pulled everything out. And I said, okay, just dump it down onto a DVD or whatever, or a small hard drive, and I'll have a look over Christmas. And then we looked at the timeline, and it was running at 19 and a half hours. And we just looked at each other and we might have a bit of work to do here. But yeah, that included the things that whole scene with the choir, I just said, we just can't touch it. It has to be left in its entirety. And, it was one of the hardest things having to cut things like that up because...
Oh, what a shame.
I always said what I would really love to do is release all 300 hours of the footage under a package called Cut It Your Fucking Self.
What can we do to make that happen, Ceri? What can Hallelujah Monkeyz do? Is it ransom? Do you need money? What do we do?
We have a Patreon now.
I'd love to make it happen because I think it's so interesting what people pick out of things. But it's a hell of a thing. But I'd love to see how many different feature films could be made out of those 300 hours. The hard part is you got to watch it all first. But I really like the idea. I still do. But yeah, that scene, I think it's got something about it. I think there's something so different I've never really seen in a sort of a music documentary before. Watching Damon stand his ground and survive, and I think everyone came out of it happy. And
also, I think it's probably the most vulnerable he's ever kind of looked on film. He's sort of he doesn't have both feet on the ground. He's got to find his balance, and it's such an unusual and maybe unreasonable position to be put in to defend your lyrics to an angry person and you need to defend it to them because there's the chance that they could just walk out and take your choir away.
Yeah, exactly. She had a point, especially when we saw it written out, and he's going, no, these are not the lyrics. I really believe that they weren't the lyrics. I know him well enough, and I can swear to God that he at no point turned to me and went, blimey, that was close. Oh, with those lyrics. It really wasn't like that. It really was not. Hold on. Someone at the door. Hold on.
No problem, Ceri. If we end up having to wrap up quickly, what are the most important ones on this list, Trev?
I was really interested in knowing if he could remember the exact number of times that he filmed Damon throwing up. Definitely.
A lot.
Great. Ceri, so you gave us all this great footage of the sessions from the Self-Titled and Demon Days. Looking ahead to what would become the band's future, though, Plastic Beach would kind of turn out to be like a tumultuous chapter for Gorillaz. Do you wish you could have continued filming and maybe documented the struggles between Gorillaz and EMI, and also kind of between Damon and Jamie themselves?
Yeah, it's really weird. You never know when you've got to finish a project, and the thing is, at the end of Demon Days at the Apollo, there's a cigarette gag that runs through the film
where he tries to throw it into his mouth. It's so good.
And actually, that moment when he catches it in the dressing room backstage at the Apollo, I just said afterwards, I said, that's the end of the film.
How could it not be?
And that is the only bit I knew about the film was we had the ending. I knew that there would be certainly some time before the next album. Could I wait X amount of years? Shouldn't we just try and get something done? Because, sometimes it's important to finish things. And so we decided that, we should get on with finishing this film. I didn't get the opportunity anyway to move on with the next project because I think Damon and Jamie allowed me as their friend to have access that was unrestricted. I think you saw two people in the process of creation that you don't often see over a long period of time. The other thing that signifies time is all the changing haircuts throughout it as well. But to have gone on to do it again when I think Bananaz, on the whole, was a pretty decent attempt at showing how a rock and roll band, which, well, let's face it, was meant to be just cartoon characters, survives and lives. It's very hard to know whether you should go for Bananaz 2 or whatever. And I don't kind of like that. In a way, I think it's unnecessary. You've shown something. Yeah, look, I could film Damon and Jamie for the rest of their lives and it would be interesting. But at some point you have to go, you know what? Times are changing. I need to move on. They need to move on. And they'd had enough of me sticking the camera in their face the whole time. And then, they got into the idea of doing how they want to do things. Sometimes you think, oh, God, I really wish that had carried on. But we'd done what we set out to do. And, you look at the distance of time and the length of time between Demon Days and Plastic Beach is quite a while, to have waited. Also, it gets tiring. Filmmaking on your own with a camera and a microphone in your hand the whole time.
I can't imagine.
Look, there's loads of adventures I've missed out on, but I had 7 years of incredible adventures with them, and sometimes I think, I wish I'd have carried on, but that's life, and everyone moves on, and actually maybe it's good that with everything that went on through Plastic Beach as well, that I didn't document it. We don't have a divine right to have access all areas at all times.
Right, and especially because at the core of that project is a friendship between two guys. And I'm sure, from a scandalistic TMZ on that level, it would have been interesting to watch those two guys have at it, however that played out. But yeah, like you say, maybe some things are best left to just be private and real life, and it seems like they're doing well together now.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, did you get, because I know you've remained friendly with Damon since Bananaz has wrapped, especially I know you guys bond over Chelsea, you're both football fans and whatnot. Did you get a sense of Damon's feelings about Gorillaz kind of shifting during the long lull between Plastic Beach and Humans? Like, was there a time when Damon was like, couldn't care less about the project, and then you watched it over time, him become more excited about it? Or what was that like from a friendship perspective?
No, he's so busy. You look at what he's done since Plastic Beach. Blur have got back together again.
Several operas and musicals.
Exactly. He's not one of those to go, what shall I do tomorrow? Something's always happened. And suddenly he turned around and said, I've been doing a load of Gorillaz stuff again. And, it's kind of, I knew he was thinking of doing it. And suddenly the stars aligned and he found the time and the space. And I think he found a lot of people that he really fancied working with that would be different than the last 3 albums. And off he went, as he does, but the decision's usually his on the music front, that he wants to go and try something. And I guess, Gorillaz, he can do certain things musically that he can't do with other projects that he's got going. It was a surprise when Blur got together again for the first time, but in a lot of ways it wasn't a surprise because Damon just does whatever he feels like musically, and stars align, or, he talks to people like, with Graham and the other guys from Blur, and suddenly things happen, and that he never closes any books. And I think that's really admirable. He allows projects to sort of, go into cryogenic quiet time, and then suddenly he wakes it up again. And, more power to him.
We opened up to some of our listeners on the Discord that we were going to be talking to you, and overwhelmingly what everybody wants me to ask you is, so there's the Snakes and Ladders bit of Roots Manuva working on a Gorillaz song that wasn't released by Gorillaz I believe in the bonus materials of Bananaz, Ceri, and everybody wants to know, do you remember any other sort of cutting room floor Gorillaz material that you wish, I wish that had come out in some way or another?
No, I can't remember. Did the Bees track come out? It did, didn't it?
Bill Murray, yes.
Yeah, it did. No, not really. There was bits and pieces of stuff, but they've all pretty much found their way to somewhere. Not that I can think of, no.
Good. Now I did that, so nobody can complain. I asked the question. I'd like to know what you think about the other two Gorillaz albums that you weren't there to watch their inception. Just as a listener.
Just as records, yeah.
Yeah.
They're interesting, as always. There's stuff going on that I find fascinating, and I love the way that they're constructed. I don't listen to them so much because I just don't have the time half the time to listen in the same way that I listened to those first two albums, because they were so much part of my life for 7 years.
Of course.
But yeah, I think they just keep evolving, and that's all you can ever hope for from anyone musically, is to keep on challenging.
I just wonder if it's anything like clicking through pictures of an ex-girlfriend's trip to Europe or something.
Well, yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? Because you're in on the ground floor, as it were, for a long time, and then you're back out in the car. So yeah, of course, I look at it a different way completely, but I still love what he gets up to and what they get up to, because they're making stuff that people love, and that's got to be all you can ever want from music, is for people to love and enjoy what's going on. And I think they keep on doing it.
I feel like I've got such a deeper sense of insight into the project. Thank you so much, Ceri.
You wonder if people have seen Bananaz and like it or whatever, because part of you thinks, maybe it's disappeared in time, when you make these things.
It is priceless, Ceri. I mean, I feel like we barely go an episode of this podcast without referencing it in some way, but it's such an important look into that side of the band, because even though things aren't necessarily as closed off or in character or mysterious as they were in Phase 1, this is not exactly a band where you have that kind of access all the time. So just thank you so much for making that documentary and for putting out all the bonus supplemental materials that you put out.
Yeah, Gorillaz is such an unconventional band that functions in such an unconventional way. It's really special for all the fans, I think, to have not just such an inside look at the process, but such a lovingly put together presentation of it.
That's true. I loved every minute of doing it, even all the pain of editing it and things. It was worthwhile because, I hope I did, a couple of my friends proud, really.
Yeah, and that really comes through in the production. So really, thank you so much.
Just send all of the raw footage to our Google Drive and we'll make sure that it comes out.
Pleasure. I'll get on with that now. It should take the next 2 or 3 years to upload it all.
Thank you so much, Ceri.
Cheers, chaps.
Trevor, that was amazing. Wasn't that incredible?
It was absolutely surreal. I mean, you heard that one part where I just kind of stopped asking questions and gushed about how weird it was to hear him actually talking to me about this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It was one of my favorite parts of the whole experience, where you were just like, this was so surreal. This was so surreal.
So weird.
Yeah. And how about, correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, I don't think we've ever heard that anywhere before about Jamie and Damon auditioning singers to play 2D.
Oh my God, I wish we had I can't believe we didn't press them on for any names or anything like that.
Yeah. What do you think? Who might have been in that room? Who could they have possibly gotten? Let's look at the Mercury Prize nominees from around then.
There was, I know one of them for some reason. I'm pretty sure the dude from Badly Drawn Boy.
Oh my God, get the dude from Badly Drawn Boy.
Because what is 2D if not that?
For sure, he is a Badly Drawn Boy.
I mean, I love Jamie Hewlett's artwork, though. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's just a joke.
Yeah, for sure.
Jamie, come on the show.
Let's see, Manic Street Preachers, they were just becoming a thing. Oh, here's my choice. What about Richard Ashcroft? He'd just gotten solo from The Verve.
Yeah, that would have been very interesting. Although, I don't know what would happen if you put Richard Ashcroft and Murdoch in a band together.
Oh, that is kind of scary. Yeah, that's a good point. They both kind
of have Messiah complexes, except on the other side.
That's a good point. Oh, here's perfect. 2001 Mercury Prize nominee, Super Furry Animals. You could have absolutely had Glenn Dillon come in.
It would happen eventually.
He practically does play 2D on a song, so
pretty much. Yeah.
Maybe that was a nod of the hat. Maybe he did show up for an interview.
Who knows? God, imagine being a fly on that wall.
I would love it. That's now on the growing list of Gorillaz moments I wish I could have been there for sure. Mm-hmm. It would have been here, sing a couple of bars of Clint Eastwood, and they're looking at each other. That sounds okay. Okay, but let me, real quick, I just want to say, Ceri, he joked around about that Cut It Your Fucking Self edition, Trevor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the semantics of releasing 300 hours of footage will probably make that never happen. But do you think that Ceri should definitely put out the full 20-minute version of that argument between Damon and that woman from the choir?
God, I can't imagine. Okay, there's the Nixon tapes, and then there's the Damon Dirty Harry Apollo argument.
Well, here's what I see. I see an opportunity, because Ceri Levy has a book out, Trevor.
Right. It's called what is it called?
It's called Critical Critters. It comes out in September. It might actually already be out in the UK. I can't remember. But anyway, it's like the third in this series. He had one called Extinct Boyds, and he had Nextinction. Critical Critters. It's this a third in a series of books dedicated to like extinct and endangered animals. So he worked with the cartoonist named Ralph Steadman, and then he writes the books. Ceri writes the books.
And together they are the Gonzovationists.
Yeah, imagine if Hunter S. Thompson made like a series of books about saving the animals. You kind of have an idea of this, right?
It sounds about right.
Here's what I say you do. Buy a copy of Critical Critters, screenshot your Amazon order confirmation page, and then tweet at Ceri Levy, at Ceri Levy, saying, please release the 20-minute version.
It might work. It might work.
It might work. I'd love to see it.
We might have gotten Lonely Man out of Dan. We could get this too.
I would kill to see that. Also, I would kill to see something that doesn't exist, which is a picture of Ceri Levy wearing Proof's D12 chain.
God. If only we had camera phones back then.
Yeah, if anybody ever discovers time travel, before you kill Hitler, please go back to that night and take a picture of Ceri Levy wearing that necklace. So anyway, either way, if you don't give a crap about that 20-minute version of that scene, first of all, who are you? Still check out Critical Critters. Seems like a really awesome book. Can't wait for it to come out. Ceri, thank you again so much for coming on the show. If you're listening, that was just what a singular experience, Trevor. What an amazing experience.
Feel free to come back anytime.
Any old time at all. Hey, Trevor, should I do that thing where I say all the places that people can find us?
Yeah, because somehow I manage to forget every week.
Oh, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr and Amino, and you can join our Discord at discord.me/monkeys with a Z. You can send us an email to hallelujahmonkeyz@gmail.com, or you can give to our Patreon, patreon.com/hallelujahmonkeyz. Thank you again to those of you who have done that. We really appreciate you.
You've gotten really good at saying that really fast.
Yeah, well, you got to plow through it. I used to be like, go to facebook.com/Hallelujah. But, people can Google Hallelujah Monkeyz Facebook and find that thing.
People don't even really listen to the last 20 seconds of podcast anyways, right? Especially because we don't do any kind of fun, cool final send-off at the end.
Well, here's the thing. If you don't listen to the whole thing and you're on iTunes, you'll have that little blue half circle. Can you live with that half circle?
I hate that.
Gotta get rid of the half circle. That's why you're like, oh, wrap this thing up, guys. I have a half circle.
So should we just sign off then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. So until next week, I've been Trevor Ickraft.
I've been Dillon Flynn.
And remember, boys and girls,
Satan loves you!